Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's College Financial Preps episode of Preparing for College. So excited to have Marianne Hughes here from Special Family Transitions. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Vicki, for having me today. So excited to be part of your podcast.
And I'm excited to have you here because it's a fabulous topic that we don't talk about often enough. And it's special needs children going to college. And we're going to be discussing today different programs that are available, what parents should be looking for, and Marianne is the expert. Marianne, can you share with everyone a little bit about your practice?
Sure. So I'm Marianne Hughes. I'm located in Houston, Texas, but I help people anywhere. And I'm a mother of two children, now young adults, on the autism spectrum on opposite ends. So one of my kids is actually in college in a special program, and I can talk about that. The other one will be able to go to college, but we're trying to find some transition programs for him as he's about to age out of public school this year, actually. And not to give you my whole story, but basically I went through a divorce several years ago and I had to advocate for my kids. And part of that was trying to figure out what they would be doing in the future to see what our future would look like. And so I had to start looking at college programs back then. And it kind of gave me a head start on what's out there, what to think about, and what would be a good fit for both of my children. And so now I have a family company where I help through divorce, but I also have a YouTube channel where I post videos on different post-18 programs, including college programs that have supports for individual students with autism or other neurodiverse conditions.
And we'll share your website in our social media as well, so that way everybody can find it. Special needs is a big area. What type of disabilities are we talking about?
That's a great question. So there's all kinds of disabilities out there that may impact your ability to go to college and to learn and have the full experience. My focus is mainly on autism and other IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so even within that, there's quite a range in the spectrum of abilities and programs that are going to be a good fit. And honestly, that's the biggest challenge, is finding what's going to be a good choice for your child based on where they are and what they want to do in the future and what they'll be able to successfully manage and get through in a academic and future work environment.
The kids are getting older. What are some of the typical challenges that parents and probably the students are facing as they're even thinking about college?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of pressure on, I know for my son, and I guess for a lot of families out there, to go to college. They think that's a traditional track that you have to go immediately from high school to a four-year college or university. But the reality, doesn't have to happen that way. You might, if your child, has the ability and has the grades and has the discipline and all the other skills to go directly to college, well, that's great. But you want to find one that maybe has supports in place in case they do need that extra help. And so even if you do go to college right away, maybe not take a full workload, not a full course load, because there's so many things you got to get used to and adjust that may be a little bit harder for someone that's maybe not as emotionally or developmentally in the same place as maybe their peers might be. That's something to think about as well, because I've heard of so many cases where people try to go to college right away, they get overwhelmed, and then they end up dropping out. And we don't want that to happen. My attitude and the way I approach this is I want to kind of build up to where we want to be in the future, start slow, find transition paths and programs to get us in the good place so that if we do want to go to a four-year university or have a full degree and course load, then we'll be ready for that at that time.
Do you find that the students or the family where they're struggling with the transition to college, do you think that there may have been extra supports that they could have used in high school to help them get better ready, be more ready for that transition?
Well, that's a great question. So in school, depending on your level of need and services at school, you may have an IEP or a 504, especially if you have an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, maybe be called something else in different states. But if you
in New York, it's IEP. 504.
Excellent. If you qualify for special education services, you may have like a case manager. You may be in special classes or get extra supports, whether it's a co-teach class or special class or pull-outs, or even just someone there to support you when you need it. And so I think in high school, the students and the parents are used to having that extra level support to kind of help them with assignments, plan, especially on the executive functioning side for study skills and things like that. I know for us, that's always been a challenge. And so I think the more you can do in high school to plan and build those skills, whether it's independent skills, advocacy skills, because whether they're living at home or not, the student's going to have to learn to advocate for themselves in the classroom, in the college setting, or whatever setting that they're in. And so to me, that's the most important thing they can try to work towards. And it's hard. And I don't know that they spend that much time in high school doing that. So I think as a parent, we have to look at that and help them in our daily activities to maybe give them a greater level of independence, give them more opportunity to make choices, and sometimes opportunity to fail. We only can learn sometimes by failure. And so I know there's a term helicopter mom, and I don't know if I want to use that term for myself or not, but I am very active and engaged in my child and making sure they have what they need and do what they need to do. And so we kind of need to pull back a little bit sometimes, but we still want to provide them support and guidance so that they are building the skills, they are developing the confidence that they can go out there and then do it on their own in the future. And not to say that it's going to be totally on their own. So my next thing is that you want to find a program or opportunity where there are supports available. So for instance, my son is in a special program that just got started at a university, but it's a special program where they have classes designed and presented in a certain way. They have academic strategy support, like a little bit like you might in high school in terms of like a case manager or a special class for study skills and supports, executive functioning skills, but it's at a college level. And so not that all schools have that, but you want to either work with a disabilities office, find out what they offer, or there are programs around the country that do have extra level support that you apply to or get in once you're accepted to that university. And there's some programs which may not be university, college, traditional programs, but are maybe community colleges or other programs where even four-year universities where it's just like a certificate type program. You're there taking classes, maybe living on campus with supports, sometimes without supports, depending on what the situation is. But they're there to help you get to your end goal, whether that's a four-year degree, associate's degree, or certificate, or just the experience of a transition program from high school to the quote unquote real world. There's supports out there. It's a lot of institutions to help you.
Let me ask you a question. Families, they have maybe a rising high school senior, they have children in high school, they're thinking about college. The disability office, what types of services should they offer? How do you know if one college is better than another college? And we're talking about supports. What kind of specific supports are out there? What's available to families?
Sure. So every disability office is going to function a little bit differently. They may have different names. And so you'll want to, first of all, visit the university after you screen to a certain level. And there's a website out there called thinkcollege.net. And that has about 300 programs nationwide. You can search by state and you can find some programs that do have support. That's a good way to start. It's not, doesn't cover every single one out there, but it's a good starting point. And so the disabilities office is a little bit different than, say, in high school, you had your accommodations or modifications and your IP or whatever it might be. And those don't carry over to college. So you have to go through the disability office or whichever program you're working with and make sure that you can get what you need, whether it's extended time on tests, they can do things like that. They can provide notes and other technology type assistance, but it's not going to be to the level that you received in high school. Just be aware of that. But you need to go in and you need to ask for those. And then they have to then connect that to the professor. You can't show up at school without doing that and expect to get any kind of extended time or accommodations. You have to work through the office first, and they have to then get the professor involved or whatever it might be.
And what suggestions do you have for parents to help their students self-advocate once on campus?
That's a great question. I would say definitely help them through the process as much as you can. Another thing that I learned as my son started school, there's something called FERPA, which stands for, it's a authorization where you can get access to their academic records and things like that. So if you don't have that,
just so everybody knows, once the kids turn 18, they're adults. They don't have to keep parents updated anymore. Parents even have to get permission from the child just to be able to pay the bill to gain access to the financial aid account. So yeah, the FERPA is important.
Right, that's a great point. And so, yeah, that's a whole nother discussion as well. Is once they turn 18, depending on the level of disability, you can either have guardianship, partial guardianship, or if your child doesn't need that level of support once they're 18. In Texas, we have something called supported decision making. You can do power of attorney, and then also do the FERPA, whatever it might be, so that you can still be involved if your child's not able to make all the decisions on their own. And most likely, when they're 18, it's going to be hard for them. So definitely be as active as you need to be to help them learn those advocacy skills. But yeah, we want to provide them opportunities to make choices and encourage them to communicate with the staff, administration, whatever it might be. For instance, my child was first starting out and learning, he might have to ask a question. Well, instead of me asking the question directly to the professor like I might have in high school, I had him compose the email. Maybe I checked it. Maybe I helped him put it together, but now he's getting better at that. So it's a slow process. And so some people may have the skills and some may struggle with that, but it's definitely something we want to be able to teach our kids, whether it's in school or something else that they need to learn, for success in life. So yeah, for sure. I think whether it's even to their own classmates, to their peers, this is something I can do, can't do, what's accessible for me based on your own values or study habits or whatever it might be, whatever situation we're talking about.
Just curious, has either of your children, or certainly your son who's in college, expressed how the program differed from high school? What can parents expect from a student's perspective?
I think they have, well, depending on the school, the program, it's not going to be as structured as high school, where you have the same schedule every day. You have to get used to working off a syllabus. You have to keep up with assignments. They're not going to maybe check in with you every day. How are you doing on this and that? You have to plan for that. You may have more downtime. Sure, you may have more studying and preparing for tests, or depending on the program, you may not. So you may just go to class a few hours a day and that's it. Well, how do you fill your time? If you're living at home, that's easier to do. But if you're living on campus, which is a whole nother challenge and skills we want to work on about living independently, then how do you fill that time? And I think that becomes an issue as well.
Suggestions when parents start to tour and explore schools, what would be great questions to ask?
So I guess you can ask things like, what are the supports that you offer? How can the students communicate with the professors? What are some social organizations and ways to work on maybe other skills? In addition to academic skills, we're also looking at executive functioning skills, which is kind of the whole time management, planning your day, figuring out how you're going to get your work done. Sometimes students struggle with that. But also if you have, say, autism or other conditions that may have some social impact, then you want to find some groups possibly that have supports for that. Some colleges do offer some organizations or extra supports that have those things. So I would make sure that you find something or a program that does offer that guidance, whether it's paid or sometimes they include it. And a lot of times they may be included once you apply to that extra special program. For instance, I did a interview recently with someone from another college, and their supports are funded through, in Texas, we call it Texas Workforce Commission, but each state has their own program for vocational rehabilitation and pre-employment services and things like that. And so those programs are great in that they maybe help you go to college, which is something to look into if you haven't already connected with your VR counselor through the local high school or another way to do that. But they could also fund programs at the universities to support the students once they're there, possibly as well. And then there's also third-party organizations like College Living Experience and some other ones that are local, where either privately funded or through your government agency to fund that support so that they are supporting them, even if the school directly doesn't support or have those services as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. I know you mentioned about divorce. Tell me about divorce, special needs, college planning, any words of wisdom, because so many parents deal with this.
I would say try to get on the same page if you can. Obviously, you're getting divorced, so you're not going to be on the same page for everything. But the key is to put the child their learning challenges. What are their challenges going to be in terms of where they'll be able to go and how to fund that? That comes down to a lot of the issues in divorce is how do we determine what the child's needs are and how do we work together to address that? So there's different ways to do that. One is child support. I'll put in a quick plug right now. If you're looking at getting child support and your child is getting government benefits, then you want to look at a first party special needs trust so that your child's benefits are protected. So we could have a whole other session on that. There's also, you can put things into a third party trust, or some money set aside there. There's also what they call ABLE accounts, which are kind of like the 529C savings accounts for college, but these are called 529A. And so these are funds you can put in to that instrument to cover things like tuition as well, and anything that's going to help your child with disability in terms of having a better life experience. That can be a very broad category. That's something to look into as well. But hopefully you can come to agreements whether or not you use these instruments. How are we going to address our child's needs and how are we going to do that together and how are we going to fund it? I think those are key discussions that need to be had and hopefully agreed to.
And just to mention, because a lot of parents in the planning stages don't realize this. I've worked with clients, not necessarily special needs, but certainly divorce. And I've been able to help parents, and not everyone, but I've had some families save hundreds of thousands of dollars on the cost of college from planning ahead and applying to the right programs and going to certain schools as opposed to other schools. And it's important to plan ahead of time.
Right. And that's a good point is you want to figure out who's going to be the decision maker when it comes to educational decisions. Some people do it joint, but it's kind of easier if one person who's been maybe the person more involved in that as a child is growing up to have that final decision-making authority. Not that they can't consult with the other person, I encourage that, but someone at the end of the day has to say, this is where we're going to go, these are the programs we're going to fund, and so on. But either way, you're going to have the funding sources in place for that to happen. And so definitely I encourage applying for FAFSA, for federal aid.
Oh, certainly. That's without a doubt. Anybody listening, I always encourage people, I don't care if they think they earn too much money and they're not going to qualify for anything. It doesn't matter. There are so many reasons to fill out a FAFSA application. Even if households can earn, I'm making this up, $5 million a year and still want to take out student loans. To do that, you have to fill out FAFSA. And there's a whole host of reasons to file FAFSA, but,
right, but also,
I always encourage it.
Yeah, for sure. But what's important to know as well is though, if you tried to apply in the past or thought about in the past when you're married, your income level is going to be different than once you're divorced. Maybe you don't have an income or it's very limited. Well, you may get more FAFSA funding and grants based on that. So that's important to think about as well.
Definitely. And that goes back to where I said about the college planning. To your point, just because we did get on a little bit on the topic of divorce, there is something in the works now called the FAFSA Simplification Act. It is perhaps changing the rules for divorce. A lot of people are fighting it. There's petitions, but I'll say this, especially if your child is applying to or will be in school, not fall 2023, but fall 2024 and forward, that this could have potential impact. Certainly I'll be discussing this more as more news comes out about it. But to your point, definitely complete FAFSA. It could certainly benefit you.
Right, it's great information. And also there's scholarships to look into and apply to that are offered for all kinds of disabilities. So there's some for every kind of disability you might be able to think of, as well as I've even heard there's scholarships for siblings of students with disabilities. So that's
great.
Look into as well. So,
no, Google is your friend. Certainly, I've worked with clients in terms of scholarship search, and one client, they had a specific digestive disorder, and there were scholarships for that digestive disorder. Whatever it is, look it up. It doesn't hurt to see if there are any scholarships that related, especially those hard to find scholarships that maybe not everyone will qualify for. Do a search.
Yeah, but like you said, you still want to get involved in that. So you can't, once your child is in college, let go of the reins for sure, because you still want to be involved in all those decisions of applications and all that, even though you want them to be involved. Still want to make sure it's being done and follow through and help them advocate for themselves. But yeah, so I would say for sure you're there. They want to, you want them and they want to build as much independence as they can so they become successful in the future. And that's going to require a lot of skills, which they can get now and later. And even if they start at community college or other programs or even outside of college, the key is to build the skills so they can do what they'd like to do in the future and be successful as they can. So every track, every person is going to look different. Doesn't mean just because one person does it one way, doesn't mean it's not the right decision for your family.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us today, Marianne. Can you share with everyone how they can find you?
Sure. So my website, the easiest way to find me, I have links to my email and all my social media, is through specialfamilytransitions.com. And so I do, as I mentioned, have several videos on different programs right now, some of the ones in Texas, but I'll continue to grow that on my YouTube channel, also called Special Family Transitions. So I welcome you to reach out to me, whether you're going through divorce or need some help on finding programs for your student who has learning differences. Happy to help out.
Thank you so much. So glad that you were here today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Preparing for College. Take care.